Welcome to this Toolbox talk. We're going to be discussing rigging on aircraft and the importance of rigging. It's vital to the safety, the airworthiness of MAF aircraft that they're rigged correctly, that we follow the correct procedures in the maintenance manuals and any technical notices that we've put out ourselves. I'm just thinking, for example, on the PD6 engine, there's a maintenance notice 20-04, which talks about the importance of setting up the fuel condition lever on the PD6 engine, for an example. But our first port of call is following the OEM's procedures for rigging. Now, often they call for calibrated tooling, they call for special rigging tools that you can manufacture. There's often instructions in the manual about how to do that. Multiple reports have come in about inappropriately safetied turnbuckles. Here's an example of a turnbuckle that's been done with safety wire. If you look in AC 43, there are many examples of ways of doing this. Often on the Cessna Caravan, the turnbuckles can use these clips. And I'll show you an example of how these clips are installed and how that we can tell if they're actually clipped in properly. So if we look here about how we would install a turnbuckle clip, on the barrel of the turnbuckle there's a tiny notch, and on the cable there's a notch, and when they're lined up, that's when the clip will travel up the barrel. And once you've pulled it into place, the cable and the barrel will no longer turn. They are locked in place by the clip. Now the clip, if you look at it on the end of the clip here, has a tiny little hook, and that hook will engage in the center of the turnbuckle because the turnbuckle is actually hollow. So when we line those up and push it in, you should hear a click. Once it's clicked in, it's locked, and even if you pull on this, it won't come out. So let's talk about some real life examples. When the last caravan that we overhauled here in Mariba went to Papua New Guinea, and they discovered on a subsequent inspection that the elevator wasn't quite rigged according to what the manual says. The interesting is they sent us down some pictures, and in hindsight it looks very obvious, but at the time obviously the engineers that did the checks believed that it was all done correctly. Now if you look at that, that's the adjust the stop nut on the elevator. It can't get any lower, so they've gone completely to one extreme. And the other image is of the other stop block, which is completely wound out, fully the other way. So I'm just saying that some of these things could be clues that maybe something's not quite right. Also, if you look at the turnbuckles, it's not entirely easy to see, but one turnbuckle is still safe, but it's right on the edge of its safety, and the other turnbuckle is wound all the way in. It's just to be aware that when you start to actually do this in the moment, that sometimes you can convince yourself that everything is okay, but maybe if you take a step back and look at it again, you might go, there's something not quite right here. Now, if you're rigging an aircraft, rigging a control system, and something isn't kind of coming into how it should be, what the manual says, you kind of got to start asking yourself some questions. Have I rigged is the neutral correct? Is the tool in the control column which sets the neutral, is that correct? Is there, for example, an STC applied to the aircraft that alters the rigging, let's say potentially on a float plane? We've just got to make sure that we're asking the right questions, because if for some reason a perfectly serviceable aircraft comes into the hangar, and then when we come to rig it, we're making massive adjustments, well, it could be that it's always been wrong, but it could be that you're also wrong yourself. Now, another thing to consider is sometimes pilots talk about this concept of power gradient, especially with a twin crew in an aeroplane, that you have a senior captain and a very junior first officer, and between the two, they don't challenge each other on the decisions that they're making. Now, sometimes that same thing can happen in an aviation situation where we have a very experienced engineer and maybe a newly qualified layman doing an independent inspection. But we just got to make sure that we are always asking these questions, we're always challenging one another, and we're always going to say, look, this doesn't look right, these turnbuckles are only just in safety, why are we adjusting these stops like a massive amount, why have we moved a stop an inch? Like, you've got to say, this doesn't make sense, okay? So we want to look at rigging in our aircraft. We want to make sure that they're as safe as they possibly can, and we just want to make sure we do it right the first time, and the aircraft are safe and airworthy.